Hi, guys. Given the rapidly changing landscape that's taking place in the life of Imam Sheikh Muhammad Tawhidi, we decided to move our chat to today. Welcome, Imam. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Shalom, my brother. I'm doing really well. Thank you very much.
عن جد متشرف انه عم بتعرف عليك اليوم. شكرا انه قبلت عزيمتي.
حياك الله. لي الشرف.
شكرا حبيبي. I just said it's a pleasure to meet the Imam, and I thank him for having accepted my invitation. Okay, so Imam, I first became aware of you, as I guess the world did, in your infamous lecture where you were basically saying, look, I mean, we escaped the Middle East, 30 years ago, and here we are now in Australia, and we're seeing the slow Islamization of Australia, which is something that I've discussed also in the context of my reality in Montreal. And I guess that started off you getting a lot of heat for having dared say that. But then secondly, you started talking about, the need to reform Islam. Let's start with the first part. Can you share with us your feelings about what is happening in Australia right now?
With regards to Australia, firstly, Australia, I can safely say that is probably the most successful multicultural country on earth because we were built based upon diversity. We managed to change a lot of what had happened within the history of Australia with regards to the British coming to Australia and then the conflict that they had with the Aboriginal community. We've managed to move on. Now we have the Aboriginals part of our parliament system. They are part of the formation of laws that we as Australians follow. And we've become a very multicultural country. We've allowed the Italians, the Arabs, the Iranians, people from all walks of life are welcome in this country. However, in the past, let's say 15 to 20 years, things have been very, I don't want to say challenging because we knew this was going to happen at some point if we were to have unmonitored multiculturalism. I want to say in the past 15 to 20 years, the true agendas of several governments showed their true colors. You have a hidden agenda, then you have a real agenda. When radicalism is just openly in your face, on your streets, in your schools, publicly opposing the Western way of life, Western democracy. Past 15 to 20 years, we've seen this. And now we've reached a stage where we had the Sydney siege and the Melbourne siege 3 days ago. And it looks like it's, well, hope, God forbid, we don't want to see a country such as Australia with the word siege after every state. And I really worry about what's happening. But at the same time, we have a powerful government. We have a powerful intelligence security when it comes to Australia. But we cannot deny the fact that we are dealing with a group of unorganized, it's an unorganized group of determined radicals that are going around there and attacking people for no reason.
So, how has the Australian intelligentsia responded to this? Is it very similar to the rest of the West, where they bury their head in the sand? No, there is no problem, and all the usual platitudes that you hear from the progressives, or are they somewhat more attuned to the realities that you are preaching?
With regards to the politicians, we have different politicians, just like every other country, the left and the right. It's typical. But when it comes to the intelligence, they're not influenced by any political motives in this country. It's a neutral body that is run by well experienced people, and they've assured us safety. And currently, we have around 300 to 400 people under police watch. And in reality, the people that are undertaking these terrorist attacks were supposedly to be under watch. But I just think that exceptions happen every now and then. Exceptions happen because, as I said, when dealing with terrorists, they're coming from a background which is unknown. We don't know how these people get radicalized. You really don't know. I mean, a police officer by the name of Curtis Chang in Sydney was shot dead by a 15-year-old, a Muslim. who had just started to go to the mosque for 2 weeks. And you know what 2 weeks means? It means 2 Friday sermons. That's what it means.
Those are
And
some
if you,
powerful sermons.
yeah, if you can sit there for 40 minutes and the first time you start thinking about killing an officer, and then the second time you start planning, then we need to shut these mosques down. But because we don't know the real problem, what is it? Is it the school? Is it the madrasa? Is it the family? Is it the illegal satellite dishes, which you would know of, that bring in all of these channels from the Middle East? You don't really see any form of organization that you can just easily ban. They pop out of nowhere, and these are exceptions, and we have to find new ways to tackle. And the police can only be successful as if we own up to the problem and start reporting people we see getting radicalized in the community.
Now, radicalized is oftentimes used as a euphemism, as though there is sort of some magical mechanism by which people get radicalized, but we have no idea where it comes from. So let me start asking some sensitive questions, especially since I'm speaking to an imam and an Islamic scholar. I mean, ultimately, people don't get radicalized because they read my books or because they read Harry Potter. They get radicalized because they ultimately somehow interact with and understand the contents of the various holy books of Islam, whether it be the Qur'an, the Hadith, the Sirah. So let's get down to the theological question. Do you, as part of your solution, do you see, and which leads us to the second point that you were making about reforming Islam, do you see specific ways by which we could go into these texts and reform them in such a way that no sensible person could ever read them and arrive at a violent conclusion? Is this feasible? Is this plausible?
I'm a realist, and as serious as this may sound, we cannot reform the hadith, because the hadith is basically a compilation uh, of sayings where a man 200 years after the Prophet Muhammad came out of nowhere and said, Bukhari, he's from Bukhara, from Iran. He was nowhere near Mecca or Medina. He comes out of nowhere 200 years later and writes the most sacred book after the Quran, and that becomes the law for the whole Muslim ummah. How, why, since when, who voted, what's going on. There's no criteria that needs to be met when it comes to these books. And I cannot deal with the Bukhari. Look, when I open the Bukhari and it tells me, as a Muslim, and I'm a Shi'i, but I spent a good 12 years of my life being trained and taught by Sunni Muslim Imams. And I traveled to Iran, and that's where I got my advanced Islamic studies by the Shi'i school of thought. There are many Sunni Muslims within my family, and I have a very balanced view when it comes to these things. I don't identify as a Shi'i or a Sunni. I dress like a Shi'i because that's the uniform that I graduated in. And but I don't identify as a Shi'i or Sunni. I identify as a Muslim. I follow the Prophet Muhammad, my version of the Prophet Muhammad, that I have found to be suitable. We'll get to that. I'm pretty sure you're going to ask me about that.
I am going to ask you about that.
Yeah. But with regards to the hadith, if I open the book, and it's nothing to do with Shia or Sunni, I open the book and it tells me, as a Muslim, go to a Christian, go to a Jew, and tell him to accept Islam. If they don't accept Islam, kill them. If they accept, still kill them, because the Jews and Christians are liars. How do I deal with such a book? That is a formula of terrorism, which is why I've used it as a to put some height for my microphone, because it's weak. But yeah, we have formulas of terrorism. I had to mention, just to explain to the people what's going on here. But we have serious books that do not deserve any type of respect, and the Muslims agree.
So you would be a literal Qur'anist. Basically, all the other holy books as part of the trilogy, you would drop those and you would say, if you wish to be a true, practitioner of Islam, just turn to the Qur'an and drop the other stuff. I mean, is that the ultimate solution that you're proposing?
I say 90% of the books of hadith, drop them completely and focus on the minority of hadith that we have, that tell us to fast and love for your brother what you love for yourself, and the good side of hadith, which actually agrees with logic and modern society and coexisting with other people from other religions. Take those hadiths, and even after you've taken them, strictly filter them. We have the ilm al-rijal, ilm al-hadith, ilm al-diraya, all of these sciences of hadith, how you filter them, the authenticity of the narrators, the authenticity of the chain of narrators, who they were they liars, were they crooks, were they known for misinterpreting or misquoting statements in the past. We need to actually filter the hadith before accepting it. Otherwise, we're just going to be a nation that we're lost, and we can't have that really. And with regards to the Quran being the Quran, I follow the Quran. However, we don't need the hadith, we don't need the Bukhari to interpret what the Quran means. Look, when the Quran says وَعَدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ, and show them every type of power and force that you have to scare them and put fear in their hearts. I know exactly it's obvious. It's a story that God was speaking to his prophets regarding a specific matter in time. Religions have war, nations have war, and they were speaking about a specific time. It's history. And I said this to many people before. If you engage in a game and you get inspired by the game, like Grand Theft Auto, you don't go on the street and start pulling up cars and shooting people, because that's not what it's about. It's a story, it's history. It shows you the development of Islam, that we can actually look past that and say, okay, look at where we've reached. We can now hug the Jew, eat with the Christian, love the Buddhist, and so on.
I'm Jewish, right? So
I know.
can we still go on with this interview, or
course.
are you damned to hell?
No, in fact, I might go to heaven. In fact, for this, yes.
Okay, let me push back a bit on your perspective. So, my feeling is, and of course you'll correct me if I'm wrong. You're much more of an expert on this than I am. Is that people's individual goodness, right? So, for example, if you are someone, you Imam Tawhidi, who you believe in peace, you believe in loving the Jews, you believe in loving the gays, so you will incorporate your idiosyncratic humanity. Because remember when you said, this is what I wish to believe about Prophet Muhammad. See, I call this unicorn Islam, or others call it cafeteria Islam, right? Whereby you pick and choose those elements that are consistent with your own moral compass, and you say, I would love those, right? There are many elements of Islam that are strictly spiritual, that are beautiful, that are lovely messages. I'm going to believe in those, say Meccan period versus Medinan period, and all that other stuff. Well, I'm going to find a way to do, all kinds of manipulations to reinterpret them, contextualize them, put them in a historical context. But do the doctrines themselves allow for the version that you are hoping for, or would it always be a defeatist initiative because the doctrines don't support your lofty position?
Within Islam, we have a problem, or I have a problem with the interpretations of at least 90% of the current interpretations of the Quran. So the problem with Islam and the understanding of the Quran is actually within 90% of our books. There are many minorities. Don't forget, we have 73 denominations within Islam. There are many minorities that see the Prophet differently, and that see the Quran differently, that see Hadith differently, and therefore, my understanding isn't my personal understanding as a result of cherry picking. In reality, it's a understanding of a large majority within Iraq, within Iran, who believe that Prophet Muhammad did not marry a 6-7-year-old. In fact, she was 20. There is another understanding, another study of the Prophet Muhammad. The problem with our version of the Prophet Muhammad, which is believed in by 5% of the Muslim population, is basically because only a minority believe in this. And the other minority believes in that he married a 6-year-old, 7-year-old. Therefore, the whole nation the whole Muslim nation encourages child brides because hey, the Prophet did it, and there'll be many other things that has been justified within the Middle East only because the Imams tell them the Prophet did it,
Right.
whereby there is no real evidence for that.
But Muhammad is insan al-kamil, right? The perfect human being, and to be emulated in all possible ways. Now, if we start with that premise, then we're a bit in a doctrinal corner, because if you wish to use reason and say, well, here are 7 things that he did that were wonderful, but here are 4 things that, well, maybe I'm not so keen on, then you are forced, if you're still going to stick to the idea that he is the perfect human, to do all sorts of mental gymnastics to say, oh no, but this was misinterpreted, it was mistranslated, no, you didn't understand if you understood it this way. So, in other words, isn't it also possible that it becomes a game of gymnastics because you wish to protect these words so carefully that you can't actually use reason? In other words, can you not find some things that Muhammad did that you, as a man of the 21st century, would say, I reject those behaviors? Or you wouldn't be comfortable saying that he is the perfect man to be emulated forever?
Firstly, I'll just set one law because I cannot change the laws I believe in. If I was a Muslim or if I became an atheist or a Christian or a Jewish, as a human being, we have laws. If there's a figure in history that commits atrocities, we will reject it completely. Completely. We don't disagree on that at all. If there's a figure that is a terrorist, we will reject. However, going back to what you just said, that Muhammad, according to the Muslims, is a well-respected, perfect figure. According to our school of thought, he is infallible. He does not sin. When we have this as the base for our own understanding, then it becomes very easy for us to completely reject all of the wrong things in history that are attributed to him. If you notice my wording, I said attributed, because if we have built the foundation that Jesus, Moses, and Muhammad are infallibles, why? Because they need to be infallible. Infallibility, in our understanding, is a tool in order that they may be able to convey the message. All of God's messages from Abraham up down to Prophet Muhammad. And if we submit to the fact that they are infallible, then Jesus cannot be of illegitimate birth, Moses cannot be a liar, and Muhammad cannot be a terrorist.
So
yes, there are many.
So they were wrongly attributed to them. So it's not so in some cases we will argue that something is misinterpreted or misunderstood. And I'm not being facetious. I'm really trying to understand your thinking. In other cases, it's if we say that Moses did such and such and we find it distasteful, then we use the sort of broad shoulders of it was wrongly attributed to him so that we can maintain his infallibility. Is that the general idea?
Yes, and until now, we have managed to actually filter all of the statements that have been attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, all of the hadith, and they are all weak. According to the science of hadith, there is no strong evidence for the majority of the actual, let's say, I don't want to say accusations, but reports, historical reports attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, and which is why I can have a conversation with you. Because if I were to stick to this formula of terrorism that tells me to kill Brother God Saad, I can't have a Skype with you. But we come and we say that this is wrong. We have to say why? Because there's no evidence for it. It's just a report. Who said it? The author. Who is the author? Did he see the Prophet? Did he live with the Prophet? It's not. The author said so. So it's very logical for us to say the author has a mental illness, because it's not one volume, it's 4 volumes, and they're all, in Arabic we say mashhoon, it's all charged with these hateful statements against other people. Why do I say that? Because these books of hadith, the one thing many people ignore is that these books of hadith actually contradict themselves. They contradict themselves and they contradict each other. So you'll have in the same book where it says the Prophet used to go and he used to love his Jewish neighbor. Why? Because they want to paint a beautiful image that the Prophet is the merciful Muhammad. And then 2 pages down the track, the Prophet beheaded 800 Jews. So make up your mind.
Khaybar, Khaybar, ya Yahud. Khaybar, Khaybar, ya Yahud, right?
Yes, I get that question all the time.
Yeah, but okay, so again, forgive me, you are an Imam, so I want to thread carefully and respectfully.
Please,
But
brother,
can you
please.
not argue that there are many passages in the Quran? Because I sense that your strategy and your ire is to focus on the hadiths and maybe the seerah and say, okay, let's remove that stuff, and then if we only focus on the Quran, we could have a more tame, more gentle, more peaceful, more respectful religion that can be that could coexist with others. But then can't I go to the Quran and look for things that you and I might perhaps with our current 21st century eyes view as distasteful? Can't I go into the Quran and find contradictions? I mean, the whole idea of abrogation, and of course I'm saying this not to you because you obviously know it, but to our viewers, the concept of abrogation in Islam comes from the fact that when you have in the Meccan period do A, and then in the Medinan period do not A, therefore you have a contradiction. Well, God, why would he have these two opposing statements? Well, then you have the mechanism of abrogation whereby the later verse abrogates, nullifies the earlier verse. So even within the Quran, you have contradictions, and we've come up with a trick of abrogation to make them consistent. So it's not as though whatever problems you are pointing to would only be found in the hadith, no?
I've said this before when it comes to the matter of abrogation and understanding the Holy Quran. Firstly, I agree on what you said initially, that there will be many verses we will find very distasteful, and I guess that's the matter with all books when it comes to divine theology and doctrine. All of these books have these swords and formulas on how to treat the hostages, and when it comes to spoils of war, and it can get really graphical sometimes, and it's not something you would want someone outside your religion to point out to you. I don't have a problem with that. I will look at it and I will explain. When it comes to the matter of abrogation, brother, I always say this. Look, Bukhari wrote 4 volumes. He has 4 volumes and he's written more. God wrote 1 book. I'm pretty sure God has more to say than the Bukhari. The fact that God's books, whether it be the Bible or the Torah or the Quran, because we believe in the Suhuf of Abraham and the books that came from with all messengers, God has more to say to that very nation than just 300, 400 pages. That being said, with that in mind, we now know that these 300 to 400 pages need some sort of deducting in order that we may form the law jurisprudence of that very faith. With all of what we have, the scholars and the seminaries and the thinkers and the enlightened people and the reformers, you're going to get really clashing views on even one ruling. The problem that we are living in right now with abrogation is that you come to Tawhidi and you say, Tawhidi, the Holy Quran says this. Why are you so peaceful? I say because the Quran says be peaceful, and these verses, the violent verses, are actually they point out a specific time when Islam was a minority religion, whereas Judaism and Christianity were more established as religions. Islam being a minority religion, these are some strict verses or even motivational verses in order that they may be able to defend themselves against the idolaters of Quraysh and so on. And don't forget, most of the armies of the Prophet Muhammad did not exceed 300, 500. They were in the hundreds. And even 50 years after the Prophet Muhammad, when his grandson Hussein was killed, he only had 72 people to stick up for him. And that's why we mourn and we're saddened by that. So we've always been a minority within that region up until the Prophet died, and then his grandsons came, and then they were also massacred. But it spread by the sword during the time of the caliphs. We'll get to that. But ISIS also uses the Quran to justify its acts. And the Ahmadiyya also just use the Qur'an to justify their peace.
But that's my point about unicorn cafeteria Islam, right?
It's more of an interpretation that forms a denomination.
But let's say the four schools of Islamic jurisprudence in Sunni Islam and whatever equivalent version in Shia Islam, none of those would ever say, well, oh, when it comes to Jews, God damn, I love those Jews. What can I do to honor and love and respect those Jews? What can I do to love and respect those homosexuals? I'm not aware of any Islamic jurisprudence that arrives to that conclusion, right? Because otherwise one would have to argue that over the past 1400 years, there is a bunch load of Islamic thinkers, all of whom have misrepresented their religion in exactly the same direction. That's a big sell to make, no?
When it comes to dealing with other nations and just what you stated, no, we do have teachings. We do have teachings, the same teachings of Jesus and Moses, or love for your brother, what you love for yourself, were also preached by the Prophet Muhammad and also his successors. Imam Ali has a famous saying where he says, human beings are either your brothers in faith or your equals in humanity. And many verses in the Holy Quran don't say, Ya ayyuhal mu'minun, oh believers in this book. It says, Ya ayyuhan nas, oh people. So in the matter of equality and loving other people, along with the verses that suggest or that state, he who kills someone innocent, it's as if he has killed the whole of humanity together. This, when the Quran emphasizes that shedding blood is not a virtuous thing, it's wrong, it shouldn't be done, we need to point the finger at the scholars, at the Imams, and even at the caliphs, even the companions of Prophet Muhammad. I go to that extent. Even those that are red lines in Islam, we need to drag them into questioning as to what on earth were you thinking that because you understood a specific verse in a specific way, you went and you butchered and you killed and you massacred just to spread the message of Islam. Now we have a whole religion, a denomination following you. So for me, it's very easy to denounce the majority of sacred interpretations to get back to the very original, let's say, message of Islam, which says respect Jesus, respect Moses, and respect their followers, because it's very logical. Muhammad couldn't have rocked up in Mecca and said, "Listen, I have a book. It says kill everyone." No one will follow him. It's as simple as that.
But that's what happened, right? So when he in Mecca, when he was sort of doing the peace and love stuff, I don't know how, was it 8 years or 13 years? I can't remember the exact
13.
number. 13. So during that period, I think he had 150 followers, right? Then he moves to Medina. The message becomes
23 followers in 13 years.
23?
Yes. Okay. Outside his family. If you're going to include his family, then it's the whole of Quraysh. The whole of Bani Hashim.
Okay, so basically, he wasn't very successful those first 13 years. Then he goes to Medina. The message becomes a lot more less peaceful, let's put it. And then suddenly he gets a lot more popular. So in a sense, you'd have to now come up with sort of a new supra-abrogation, I mean, in a doctrinal sense, whereby the violent stuff is now re-abrogated to the Meccan period. I mean, in other words, what tools would you use so that everyone would agree with your vision? Is there a set of keys, doctrinal keys, that one can use to resolve this conundrum?
Brother God, I'm not here defending Islam or defending my prophet or defending at all. I'm clarifying the way we see things, which is always subject to debate. With regards to Mecca and Medina, in Islam, the time where the Prophet was in Mecca, he was that poor Muhammad who was basically the kick around of Arabia. People accused him of being a psychopath, insane, liar, wizard, and so on. In Medina, he was the ruler. In Medina, this is politics. He had a government. in that sense. I don't believe the Prophet Muhammad had a government at all, and I don't believe that he ever ruled. But the Muslims love this Islamic government business, whereby I don't believe he had a government, and I have my research on this field. When he was in Medina, it was much more established as a religion, and with Baytul Mal, meaning now he's got a economic wing for his establishment, and also the trained followers, where you have an army now. You know, he didn't really have an army, but whenever he needed to defend himself, there were people that knew how to fight. And don't forget, even in Mecca and Medina, he was still a minority amongst the people. And therefore, it's very normal for the Romans, which they did, for the Romans to attack the Prophet many times, to attack him, invade. Why? Because he was posing a threat. He was posing a threat to their economy. He was posing a threat to their gods. The basic Islamic banking system that says no interest. Like, you're ruining the whole region when you come up with such a thing. And the Arabs in the Holy Quran, it clearly states in the Quran, رحلة الشتاء والصيف, the travels of the winter and the summer, which means that these nations would interact during these seasons to trade whatever products were grown or made during that season. And the Islam came and said no interest, no riba, none of this, none of that. So how are people going to live? Islam came up with a very strict tone, very demanding tone. So the Prophet Muhammad didn't say, listen, I don't want you guys to... he didn't... When it came to Islam, let's look at who he came to. He came to a group of ignorant people. I mean, they were burying their daughters alive. They weren't graduates from Oxford University. So he had to deal with that mentality. And the Quran itself says to the Prophet, look, this is divine revelation. So when I say the Quran says to the Prophet, it basically means Archangel Gabriel came down and told the Prophet, and when he comes down, the Prophet's blood pressure goes up and he starts to sweat, and this whole procedure that we were taught. And then he tells him the very important statement. Can you please tell your guys to enter the house from the front door? يدخل البيوت من أبوابها. Can you please enter the house from the front door? Like, what on earth were they doing? How else would you go inside your house?
Right.
And this is tell the believers, not the ignorance of Mecca. So they were already Muslims. Like, this is the level of intellect we were dealing with. And they were burying their daughters alive. So when Islam came, it didn't say, please, can you kindly not do this, not kill your daughter. No, Islam came and said, if you kill your daughter, you go to hell. Why? Because psychologically, and you would know, if you warn someone several times and they don't stop doing that wrong thing, and then you semi-threat, you give them a small threat, that if you do that, you're going to go to hell. You do that, I'm going to do this to you. When you incite fear, and you warn them that if you continue raping and killing and butchering, hell will await you. In the whole world of theology and doctrine, this makes a lot of sense.
But
this is enough sense, yeah.
I mean, one could understand that Islam would take a tough position against, rape and burying your daughter alive and so on. But again, and forgive me for asking this, there are elements of Islam that are very tough that many people, certainly the kuffar, would find not very interesting. So for example, there is a strain, and that's putting it charitably, of Islamic supremacism in its text, right? I mean, the world will be at peace when we are all united under the flag of Allah, right? I mean, and that's
not
how
really. That's how it's seen.
I mean, okay, so tell me, is that a wrong interpretation?
Of course,
that's the ultimate goal? Okay, why is that?
Look at Saudi Arabia. They're all united under Allah and they're beheading each other. Look at Iran. Look at Iraq. They're all Shia and they're butchering and killing each other. Show me a one good Islamic government so we can believe that if you guys were to rule the world, we will all be at peace.
So all of these guys, so Saudi Arabia with all of its grand sheikhs and all the guys from Al-Azhar University and all those guys who are preaching, right? I could right now put below our chat, 7,000 different clips from very learned imams and sheikhs and muftis and so on, all of whom would not be interpreting whatever positions you are interpreting or promulgating. What do we say about them? They're not true Muslims. They're misinterpreting. They're misguided. How do we reconcile your hopeful message, which of course is in the minority, with the majority position, which doesn't seem to agree with you? How do we make those congruent with one another?
They don't have to agree with each other.
Okay.
Because the very people that you're referencing, they within their books, they are set to kill us. They believe in the very ideology of Ibn Taymiyyah, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, that says butcher and kill the Shia, butcher and kill even the Sunni that has a meal with the Shia. So why would I want to engage with these people in the first place? They're the ones that are saying Islam is the peaceful system for governance. We say, okay, show us your example. We've given you 1,400 years. You've had many Islamic governments. Show us. In fact, Oman is such a peaceful country, full of Muslims. And don't forget, Oman had the Nabhani dynasty. We're talking a history of Islamic governments in that region. And when the Nabhani dynasty were there, they were all criminals. But Oman managed to develop, and the current sultan who overthrew his father, they managed to develop and become good nations. But yet, he's peaceful because he doesn't claim to be an Islamic leader. It's a Muslim nation, no Islamic leader. Emirates as well. It's beautiful because there's mosques and there's a separation of mosque and state. There's the name of Islam. Beautiful. Show me an Islamic government that is good. Show me one.
So are you saying that they are practicing a version of Islam that you're trying to eradicate, or are you saying that they've been misinterpreting the true Islam? I mean, I take your point, but so what results in that? Why is that happening? How come all of those Islamic societies and countries are not seeing the Islam that you wish to see? Why is that?
It's because I want the Muslims to understand that Islam as a religion was sent to guide people, just like Christianity, just like Judaism. The main purpose for religions is to guide people, not to rule over them with the sword using it.
So you believe, excuse me for interrupting. So you believe that, because I've always said, look, I don't care if you practice Judaism, Islam, Zoroastrian, as long as it is in the privacy of your home, the privacy of your conscience. The second that you infringe on by 1 inch on the right of another, then it is no longer acceptable. Certainly my experience with Islam as somebody who escaped Lebanon during the Civil War, and anything that I've learned since, is that, Islam doesn't typically live a tepid existence whereby it says, I just want to practice my religion peacefully while not infringing on anybody else. Typically, it imposes itself in the public sphere. We see it, for example, at the universities now, all over the West, at my own universities. The rights of the Muslims are constantly reasserted. We want to separate this, we want this, we want that.
Special treatment.
So again, are you saying that there is a way to interpret Islam where this reaffirming of the takeover of the public sphere would not be tolerated under Islam?
I think the main issue we have here isn't the fact that there are Muslims acting in such a way. I think we are mixing between the Islamic teachings and the Islamic culture. We have a culture of Muslims, the authoritarian Arabs, and then we have the Islamic teachings, the culture of the Muslims, which I call the Islamic culture, which is not really the culture of the religion. Yani Hassan Nasrallah, if he was a Christian, he would still be as bad. Any religion you put him in, he's going to do the same thing. Any religion. He's a terrorist.
You just increased your number of death threats by about tenfold. So good luck with that one.
God bless you. I have to say it.
Okay.
I have to say it. I'm glad you're laughing. I have to say it. Yani, There are people whose culture is like that, and they're born like that.
So do you think
And
is this driven? I mean, as somebody, of course, who studies psychology, I'm interested in your thoughts. Not because now you're not talking about religion. You're talking about is the tribal nature of Arab society that might have resulted in what you're talking about, the Islamic culture that has this element of belligerence. Is that your argument, that it's due to the tribal nature of these fractured, tribes? Is that what's causing this belligerence?
I say the culture plays a big role in the religiosity of the individual, regardless of what religion they are from. However, in Islam, because of the close nations with one another, so for example, Israel being a state uh, is copying a lot of hate from the neighbors. But if we had many Jewish neighbors, the audacity of the Jews would be a lot higher, naturally. The same with the Muslims. We have all of these neighbors who are all Muslims neighboring each other. Therefore, you have a wide geographic spread of this Arab culture. And when religion comes and spreads on top of that, so you have layer over layer. Therefore, mix that with politics, mix that with poverty, mix that with the awaiting savior who they're all awaiting and their preparations for it. Mix that with rulers such as Saddam Hussein, everything. Put all that together. You can't really possibly expect any peace to come from that at all. So the Quran along the side, with its interpretations, doesn't really help
Right.
amongst all of this. So I say, instead of going and trying to change the culture of a nation, I know that all of these nations agree on one book. Let's get rid of the violent interpretations of that very book so that we can move on as Arabs, but stay peaceful, stop beheading each other. And as Jews, and let everybody live, and as Christians, and just get along. Because if it comes down to culture, we'll know what we'll be fighting about. It'll be money and land. It won't be because I
And
want
women,
you to
and
go to
women,
hell.
and women.
Yes. It
Because
won't be
there's no
about hell
point,
and heaven.
right? There's no point having land and having money if it doesn't get you the women. It all boils down to women. That's the most powerful force in nature.
Indeed, even the suicide bombers. Why? Because they've been
72
promised
virgins,
72.
of course. I actually talk about this in my first book, where I discuss
Yeah.
the fact that many of the contents of the doctrines could be understood from a very basic biological perspective, right? The female suicide bomber is not promised 72 gorgeous cabana boys with muscles, because we know that the sexual fantasies, if you'd like, of men and women are not necessarily the same. And so you have to have different selling points for the male suicide bomber and the female. It's basic evolutionary psychology.
The women also get men. They call,
Oh, is that right?
yes, in the very verse, it states حور عين حور عين ولدان مخلدون. So
Right.
there are men that will last for forever.
Oh, that's that they're sexually potent. You mean that
You
I
can
understand.
interpret
I
it
get
that
it.
way.
I get
I'll
it.
say they live forever.
They live forever. That's right. They will live forever.
See? This here is we just interpreted one verse in two different ways. So
Very
you can think of it that way. I can think of it, with regards to their age, because that suits who I am. But in any case,
very
we
nicely
do.
done.
We have these verses that promise all of this, and I think it's actually, we have in our hadith that speak to the people according to the size of their intellect, to the size of their brains, if you will, according to the very statements of the prophets. If a man came, well, we have in our narrations as well, a man came to the Prophet Muhammad who loved women. He said to him, "You want me to pray and fast and do this and not drink and not eat pork? What do I get when I go to heaven?" And the Prophet Muhammad said, "You get lots of women." He said, "Wonderful." So he became a devout believer.
Right.
And then someone else came and he loved money. So he asked the Prophet, "What's in it for me?" He said, "You get lots of money in heaven." So the companions, they said, "Prophet Muhammad, you're giving each one a different answer. Which one is it?" The Prophet said, "You speak to all of them according to their own understanding."
A true psychologist.
Yes, and when you look at the book, it's not speaking to one type of nation. It's speaking to humanity. You're going to have things there that will attract everyone. It will have the women, it will have the logic, it will have the poetry, it will have the political science, the miracles, if you will, the everything. It has to be a combination of everything that satisfies everyone, because it's one edition. It's not going to come every month. So it's one-off book, and it's up to you to interpret.
I want to just very briefly touch on Israel, since you mentioned it a few minutes ago. And then I want to
Yes.
take our conversation. Much of our conversation has been about the doctrines of Islam. I want to now talk about some of the current issues dealing with Islamic incursions into the West. But you, in one of your lectures, I think it's the same one where you were saying that you're seeing all sorts of Islamization in Australia. You said something which, of course, as I was watching it, I was like, wow, I can't believe that an imam is actually saying this. You said, of course, Israel is for the Jews. Where do you think they come from, and so on? I'm guessing that a large percentage of your death threats might be coming from that one statement alone, no?
Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Right.
My emails have been hacked several times, because they really want to know if I have some sort of connection with Israel or the Queen or something
Right.
like that.
You're a Jew, really. You're pretending to be an imam, but you work for the Mossad, correct?
Zionist, yeah,
Zionist.
MI6 and CIA, and
Exactly.
yes.
Now, what is it that allows you? So now I'm asking as a psychologist, right? What is it in your personhood that allows you to say, look, I'm a committed Muslim. I mean, look, I'm an imam. My father was an imam. I come from a lineage of Islamic scholars. I believe in my faith. Yet I'm going to stand up and say, of course, Israel belongs to the Jews. What is it that allows you to sort of have that, I'm going to say honesty, because yes, there is a link between the Jews and the land of Israel, and that doesn't allow so many other people to have those two things within them? I could be a Muslim, but I could also be honest and give the dignity of the Jews to live in that land. What is it that allows you to make that link, but millions of others can't? Why is that?
Brother God, I'm going to answer you in a way that might surprise you and might surprise your audience.
Okay.
And this is because I don't play taqiyya, and the same way I was honest in that lecture, I'm still the same person. Every Muslim, imam or no imam, knows for sure Moses came before Jesus, and Jesus came before Muhammad, and Muhammad came after them all. So in no way could Palestine or Bilad al-Sham, which includes Israel, or the land of Israel, Jerusalem, in no way could that be Islamic land from the very beginning. This is basic history, basic geography. Saudi Arabia, or Arabia, was there, and Palestine is somewhere else. And for that to spread, Islam to spread, that happened during the time of the caliphs. Yes, the Prophet Muhammad did pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque. But come on, how long did he spend there to spread? He's not going to change the whole country. Later on, Islam expanded. So the point is, when Prophet Muhammad was in that land, he knew very well this was Jewish land. He knew Moses and Jesus walked this land. And the very people who followed Jesus, they were originally Jewish people. So if they change their faith and become Christians and then become Muslims, you've changed your faith. You haven't changed the history of the land. From Cairo, which I've been to, you have the graveyards of the Jewish people, to Iran, to Iraq, all the way to Yemen, this entire area. We had Jewish people. We cannot deny this. Why can't they say it, but I can? And the answer, as foolish as it may sound, is because they depend on Islamic centers to give them money to live, and if they speak, they will lose their financial support, whereby I am financially supporting myself by myself because I've been successful in some business projects, And that's why I have the freedom to say what I like without fearing anyone to come with the scissor and cut my income from me and my family. That's the main reason. So if they were all financially free and they had some sort of security, they will all speak out. Yes, we have some really dumb imams. We have really dumb imams that will speak
So,
as
so,
though
so,
Muhammad was before Adam. We have people like that.
so it is not true, as one Iranian imam said, that earthquakes are caused by the fact that women dress in a very provocative manner. There is no link between the provocative attire of women and earthquakes. Can we put that one to bed?
Yeah, that reminds me of the left when they say the climate change causes the attacks in London.
Oh my God, don't get me going on that one, Imam. I have been trolling Bill Nye for over a year because immediately after the Bataclan attack in Paris,
The solar power ones.
exactly. Oh, look at you. You are up to date. And people said to me, why do you constantly go after Bill Nye? I said, well, I go after him not because I hold any personal animus against him. I don't care about him. But the fact that you have such a large platform from which to spread stupidity, right? I mean, the type of mental gymnastics that you have to go to say that these Paris guys did what they did because of CO2 levels and solar panels, I mean, it's breathtaking. That's why I go after him. So in a sense, one of the things that I admire so much about you is that, of course, I know that you're getting tons of death threats. There are huge personal costs to you. But the mere fact that you take the time and take the risks to speak your mind. And by the way, this is what amazes me, right? I mean, people don't appreciate the irony that you're not asking for anybody's killing. You're not saying anything incendiary. You're speaking your mind. If Islam and all of its variations were so peaceful, why is it that you would have to send me a private message an hour or two ago saying, hey, brother Gad, the death threats are coming in? I mean, do people not appreciate the irony of that? What's going on there, Imam?
I think it's because they haven't seen an imam like myself, unfortunately, who comes out. So they've been witnessing very corrupt imams who call for the beheading and killing of people. All of a sudden, they have this patriotic Australian with the flag, and he's full on for Western democracy. I've been like this since forever. I've only been discovered by media 2 years ago, and I've been working my way on social media. There are many imams that agree with me. There is hope. There are many imams in the UK, in Canada. By the way, I used to live in Ottawa, just outside the belts in Canada, a small area called Canada.
Nice.
Temporarily, yeah, I was there for a while. I was lecturing there, and I've been to Van City, Vancouver, Surrey, Richmond.
Nice.
I haven't been to Toronto, but yeah, I've been
Montreal. I'm in Montreal. That's where you need to come.
I'll come one day. So yeah, we have these imams that agree with me. The main issue is, one, there's a big language barrier. Two, they're afraid to speak. Three, they can't speak because they're within Islamic governments. Four, what do they say exactly? What do they say? So they come out and they say Palestine is Jewish land, and then what? His wife's going to leave him. His family are going to go against him. His children will think their dad's crazy. What do they say? I mean, I have the ability to speak like this because I know what my circle is like. And believe you me, if I knew that I would lose a good friend or a good relationship or something because of my statements, I would be thinking twice about tweeting. But because I know that the people around me know my development. I mean, I was someone who used to hit his head with a sword.
Right.
You know, I was someone who hated.
This is Ashura, right?
Well, in different occasions,
Yeah.
It's not only for that.
Okay.
And I was someone who didn't like the West. You know, I was just because I received the Sunni upbringing within school, 8 hours private Muslim school a day. I got home, I was so tired, I would just sleep. My main Islam came from the private school in Western Australia. And when you grow up like that, you begin to hate everyone.
Right.
And it only hit me. I only woke up when I met someone. I will not mention his name at all. I might reference him in the future if I write a book. I might reference this person was not an imam, was just a well-known lecturer. He sat with me, and me with my, excuse me, with my close-mindedness, we had a big debate, and I lost the debate. I lost the debate, and he proved me wrong. He proved everything I was strongly believing in to be absolutely wrong. So, change is when you decide to change. It's not when you eventually, gradually change. So I walked out of that debate saying, you know what? Thing needs to change. I went back to my scholars who are still alive and who are lecturing, and I started emailing them. I never got one response. And I was the devout number one student in that class. And I had memorized the Quran like that. And
Hafiz,
well, I'm
you're
not I'm not a full hafiz, but I memorized what they were teaching us. Like the whole Al-Baqarah, I memorized it by heart. That's the biggest chapter in the Quran. And I said to them, you taught me this, but why did you hide this from me? Why did you want to do this? Why? Why did you? Why were you very selective when teaching me? They wouldn't answer. In fact, some of them blocked me. Some of them insulted me. Some of them told the other students to block me and not speak to me. Some of them announced me to be somewhat of an apostate. It didn't really work out for them. Uh, Look, I come from that background, so for me, it's okay to speak because that's part of my development. No one can say I'm lying because I've lived that life.
But see, what's so amazing about what you're saying is precisely why I so enjoy doing these chats, because I too come from a land where you weren't allowed. Right, I come from Lebanon, where you couldn't openly criticize the government. You couldn't be very frontal about criticizing religion and so on. Even though Lebanon was supposed to be a progressive, modern Middle Eastern state. And I always say, look, I mean, there are two ways we could resolve our differences. We could either do it peacefully through debate, and where one person will lose the debate, the other one will win, or maybe neither will be moved in either directions, or we could do it violently. I think one of the problems in Islamic societies, and it could be, as you correctly said, due in part because of the religion and in part due to culture that has nothing to do with religion, is that there is a strain of might is right, right? The way that I show you that I'm right is that I kill you, that I behead you, that I silence you. This is how we resolve debates. And I think that if we're able to convince a great majority of people that as long as we treat each other with respect, we may disagree. You and I may disagree on whether Muhammad is the perfect guy or not. But as long as we engage one another respectfully, we're kind to each other, we walk away as friends, we are both enriched by the fact that we interacted with each other. You're not saying anything that is so violent and vile that you should be deserving of receiving death threats. But that's the reflex that comes from these societies. This guy is saying something that I disagree with, kill him. We need to get rid of that reflex, correct? I mean, obviously.
Definitely, definitely, because the main reason why I want to reform is basically because I don't want my own religion to end up killing me. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And that would be very sad. Honestly, you're devout for the religion, and I'm very strict, brother. You see how modern and moderate and peaceful I am. That's how strict my faith is. So in my faith, when you're very strict, that's who you become. You become someone that sits with the Jews and loves the Christians and eats with the Buddhists. But in other denominations, the moment you become strict, you go behead all of them.
Right, right. ISIS.
So yes,
Let's link it now to some of the current realities. So, a question that I raise with all of my guests who have expertise on these issues is I always ask them about immigration. And the issue, of course, which you've sort of touched on, I think, in one or two of your lectures, is how
yes,
do we strike a balance between remaining humane, open, tolerant, right? I mean, out of a thousand Muslims that are going to come in, I'm willing to bet that almost all of them are going to be lovely and kind and hospitable, and they don't want any of this violent stuff. But of course, many of them are going to carry with them, whether it be religious or cultural values that may not be consistent with those that you cherish in Australia or those that I cherish in Canada. So, how do we strike a balance that we remain open to all peoples to come in, while at the same time recognizing that there is something unique about folks who come from these Islamic societies? forget about the religion. If you don't want to attack religion, that have cultural values that are inconsistent with ours, is there a way for this problem to be tractable?
The one thing that I believe is going on with the let's say the Muslims, our Muslim community is what's causing the problem, especially with multiculturalism in the West. If they're coming to the West, to Australia, to Canada, as refugees, then we need to ask them a big question. Do you want to be part of us? Do you want to integrate, or do you want to blend in? If you want to blend in, then you're going to be causing problems. You know, you're going to have a Grand Mufti who dresses in a suit and tie, talks like Muhammad al-Arafi in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
It's not going to work. We don't want savages in suits. We don't want that. You have a barbaric ideology.
Tariq Ramadan might fit that description.
He's an apologist.
Right. Okay.
He's an apologist. And he will tell you that ISIS are Muslim, but ISIS, the version of, no, he will say ISIS is Muslim, but the version of Islam that ISIS has is not Islam.
Right.
I say no, that is the real version of Islam. If you really want to implement Islam, really want to implement it, yani. Take the Quran word for word, go. Chop the hand of the thief and butcher and kill. That's it. That's the real Islam. Do not come and say it's not. It is. And that was present in that time. ISIS wants to live 1,400 years backwards. Yes, the verses of the chopping the hand, the chopping, it's all there. We cannot deny. Tariq Ramadan comes and says, they're a Muslim. Why? Because they say la shahada, ashhadu an la. They testify that God is one, God is Allah, and Muhammad is the Prophet. So you can't really exit them from Islam. But their Islam is not the true Islam. They've got it wrong. No, he's got it wrong. He's got it wrong. And probably, in reality, according to the majority of the Muslims, his Islam is not the true Islam. Because you really can't, you can't, just for interview's sake, make up your own argument and then expect everyone to believe you. It's not going to work. I don't want to speak too much about Tariq Ramadan, but when it comes to the main point of multiculturalism, the blending in is a big problem. Oh, look at these Muslims, the fashion hijab and everything. Wallah al-azim, the majority of the death threats I receive from Muslim women are the Muslim women that don't wear hijab. Full on makeup, and they're the ones that want to kill me.
But why? What? Because you're infringing on the right of their Muslim sisters to wear the Islamic garb? What's causing them to be angry?
No, just I don't like the Bukhari book, for example.
Okay.
Or I believe that Israel is a state, for example. The one with the burqa hardly ever threatens me. Hardly ever. It's always the one that has too much makeup or has nothing to do with religion. Yani, music is supposedly a big sin. You go onto their Facebook to report them, for example, or to block them, you will see Amr Diab and Nancy Ajram and everything is there. And you're like, why you? You should be the happy one.
So is it? So let's see if we can analyze it psychologically. So could it be that because she is so modernized, one of the ways that she could signal that she is still a true believer is to look upon you as the filthy, Shia dog who is spreading mischief, right?
Indeed, definitely. Why? Because that's what they've been nurtured with. In order for you to be a religious person, you need to reject. You start off with hating, and that's what I used to preach before. I used to preach this before, and it's La ilaha illallah. It's no one else.
Right.
No, it's always hate. It's always that. No, we can look at things differently. We don't have to be like that. With regards to multiculturalism, big problem is we have economic migrants. Habibi, they're not refugees. What kind of a refugee comes off the boat with bangles and gold and mashallah? What kind of refugees? In Australia, we don't have Muslim beggars. We don't have that. Because we're all well off, alhamdulillah. We have to appreciate what this country has given us. In fact, even in Canada, some of the Muslims live in a better lifestyle than the Canadians themselves. And we cannot deny this. We can't. In the very state that I'm living in, all of the petrol stations are belonging to a Palestinian family. and then they cry for Palestine. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. You
Incidentally,
shake.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your point.
Nah, I'm finished, brother.
I was going to say that in 2001, I was on a sabbatical for. I had a 1 year sabbatical from my university. I decided to spend 7 weeks of that sabbatical in Australia and New Zealand. 5 weeks in Australia, 2 weeks in New Zealand, and I think, is it okay if I say which city you're in? I guess people know, right? It's not a security
Yeah,
agent.
I'm in Adelaide.
Yeah, you're in Adelaide. So I actually visited Adelaide. I'll send you some photos of us in the famous market of Adelaide by the University of Adelaide. We were all over the place. And honestly, I don't think I've had a trip that was more beautiful than Australia. So I really do appreciate when you say there is so much to defend about Australia, both its culture, its beauty. It is a perfect society that is truly tolerant, that's truly peaceful, that's truly multicultural in the good sense of the term. Multicultural in the sense that there are many different ethnicities. Multiculturalism is a problem as a political philosophy when you basically say to people, come in and don't adjust to our values. You have the right, if you want female genital mutilation, who are we to judge you, right? So you use cultural relativism to turn a blind eye to practices that are grotesque to our value. And I think that if we force people when they come, look, if you want to come here, my brother, no problem. Tall, short, Jew, Christian, Muslim, atheist, but you have to respect our values. That shouldn't be such a hard sell. Why does it seem as though simply saying that is then construed as racist and bigoted? Why is that?
I don't know why, but we have the left that are actually working day and night, striving very hard. And what they're doing, they're rubbishing the Australian values. They're rubbishing the Australian culture, which I have adapted to, I've integrated. And then all of a sudden they want to take it away from me. That's not going to happen. And brother, you're an Arab, and I'm also an Arab. Originally, we're both Arabs, and me and you both know what it's like in the Middle East when it comes to a foreigner coming in. As soon as they come in the airport, ahlan wa sahlan, welcome, welcome. And the moment they turn their backs, you najis kafir dog. Straight away.
You wanna explain to people what najis means, just so that they know?
Najis means impure.
Right. There is sort of a hierarchy of impure substances. So there is, urine, feces.
Najis is the essence and core of all impurities.
And of course, the kuffar are very high on that list. Correct?
Yeah, very high. You have to wash the hand after you shake it. Shake their hands. Yeah, and then we came to Australia. Honestly, let's be very frank. I came to Australia. I have never once slept hungry in this country. Right. Never once. And we ran away from where? From a Muslim community. Many people will say, yeah, Saddam Hussein was a terrorist or dictator. No, we ran away from Shia, right, from Iranian government. So you run away from your own people. You come here. And then you have to appreciate. We give back, and I've applied for the Australian Reserve Army as a chaplain, first preference, and second preference as an army soldier. And I'm proud. I'm very proud. What makes me really, really burn inside, and what makes my heart cry, when I see people from my own background not appreciating what is in front of them. Where in Iraq do you have grass? Where do you have football fields made out of grass? Right. They're playing on rocks, and you come here, fresh water, breeze from the oceans. Even in Canada, look at that. You have 3/4 of the world's fresh water. You have all of that, and then all of a sudden, they kafir, infidel, you want to take over just because you have money. You want to buy estates, and you want to establish your small mini Islamic community. That makes me burn. I don't want my country, Australia, to become I don't even want it to become like Dubai. I want it to stay Australia, which is why I have copped a lot of hate.
Well, and incidentally, I mean, you're a perfect manifestation of someone who could retain their original heritage, their practicing their faith, and yet be fully westernized in their values, right? I'm Jewish, but more than being Jewish or Muslim or Arab, I believe in freedom for everybody, right? So I do what I do without a single hint of hate in my heart. I do what I do. When I see the Islamization of Montreal, it's not because I hate Islam. It's not because I hate Muslims. It's because I know that there is a reality that comes with an increased Islamization of a society. And I wish for Muslims and non-Muslims and everybody to live in peace and in freedom. And when you have a society that becomes more Islamized, the probability of that happening goes down. So we should be able to say that without being, I mean, I don't, of course, receive the death threats that you do, and I hope that all those death threats go away from your head soon. But I also receive, oh, you're a bigot, you're a hateful guy. And of course, there is no hint of hate in my heart, right? I'm willing to bet that most of the people that I've had as friends throughout the years were much more likely to be Arab non-Jews than Jews, right? I don't care about Jew, and I care about freedom. And so someone like you who escaped the hell from the Middle East, comes to Australia, could still be fully Muslim. I mean, you're an Imam, but yet you could say, I love Australia. I love the values here. And I think if more Muslims took that bent where they could have both of these parts of their identity coexist within their personhood, I think the problem would be halfway to being solved, correct?
It would be the best step in the right direction. But they don't want that. They don't want it, Habibi. And the issue here in Australia is that we have a very tolerant majority. Very tolerant, very peaceful people. And the worst thing that could happen in Australia would be a rally against radical Islam. The worst thing,
Right.
a rally. I mean, you imagine in the heart of, for example, in the heart of Mecca, where Christians used to live in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, or in Medina, where in the time of the so-called government of Prophet Muhammad, we had the temples and the synagogues and the churches. If now under Islamic government they want to build a church, AK-47s will raid the whole place.
Of course.
And me and you both know it. And the beheadings and the chopping and the RPGs will come from different. They'll fly in from different states to all have a piece of these poor Christians. And here, Habibi, we have mosques in every corner. Every suburb in Melbourne, they have Broadmeadows Mosque, Roxburgh Park Mosque, this mosque. That, every area has its own. This is beside. Look, this is not national media, so I can freely say this. This is besides all the backyard mosques. And you know what Arab garages are like, yeah? You have, it's a garage, but lots of Bukharis, and you have the Imam give sermons, and we have lost control because we're too tolerant.
Yeah.
And what makes me really sad is I know where this is going.
Yeah.
I know where this is going. Now, can you believe before it was applications to have Muslim graveyards, Muslim only graveyards. Then the Muslim only mosques who don't do National Open Day. Then we have the Muslim only libraries, Muslim only swimming pools, public swimming pools with curtains. Now, yesterday, they want a safe space, and this is the Victorian.
Oh, I heard about that.
Victorian Muslim Council wants a safe space. We laugh at it because we know where this is going. It's step by step, and alongside all of this, we have the large Muslim estates, manataq, in Arabic, big suburbs, areas, all Muslim. Come on, you're gonna have a Muslim estate. What's the road gonna be named? After who? Which terrorist in history are you gonna name the road? Which terrorist in history? Honestly,
well, that's what the Palestinians do, right? Every single square is named after a shaheed, right?
Yes, or even those who spread Islam by the sword, the caliphs. You're gonna have the street of Muawiyah, okay, and Muawiyah butchered and killed everyone he didn't like. Right. So I don't want to see Australia go down that road at all.
So are you now being listened to more carefully by the key politicians and gatekeepers? Are you a voice that is heard, or are you on the periphery, but they're more than happy to listen to the Muslim Brotherhood and so on? Or are you part of the discussion within the political landscape of Australia?
I'm not part of the political discussion at all. Not part yet. And I believe because the Labour Party has created a paradigm for politics and political discussions in this country where it always heads one way. And they formed a system out of this. Now that Imam Tawhidi comes out of nowhere, he has, well, to them, I've come out of nowhere, to this community, to this whole left right debate, I've come out of nowhere because obviously I have my history around the world, a good 10 years going back, showing how skinny of an Imam I was, preaching what I had been taught. But comes to them out of nowhere. They weren't expecting me. I come and now I say, look, I'm a Muslim. You can't label me a bigot. You can't label me a white supremacist. I'm still a Muslim and I stand for Australian values and I have conservative views.
Boy, they're confused when you say that, aren't they?
What are you going to do to such a person? What do you call him?
You must be a
What?
Jew in hiding. You must be a Jew. There's no other explanation, Imam.
No, I had a father, a bishop from a church. He sent me a wonderful letter. He goes, I swear to God you're a Christian. I will bet you anything you're a Christian. You can't be a Muslim. You're a Christian, my brother in faith. And he keeps sending me emails, and I know where he's coming from, and I appreciate the love and everything. But to be honest, it's just about being a good human being before all of this. Religion shouldn't be the priority. Being a human being should be the priority for everything. Once we've established that we're all human beings, then we can go on to taking matters ideologically, and it should always stay at home. The religion should stay at home. I don't want to see an Islamic government again in my life. I don't want it. I want an atheist, completely no religion in government. Just do and say whatever you like. Otherwise, if you have a Christian government, the Muslims are going to be complaining. A Jewish government, the Christians are going to be complaining. You're going to have a Muslim government, everyone's going to be complaining. The Muslims themselves are going to be complaining. They'll kill each other. The Muslims will kill each other. This is what history has shown us. The Jews will be in government. The Muslims will complain. The Christians will complain. It just doesn't work. Get religion out of politics and just focus on serving the nation. Sadly, too much left in Canada and in Australia.
Oh yes. Listen, we're gonna stop soon because I know you have a very busy day ahead of you. But speaking of the left, you may or may not be familiar with Justin Trudeau, our current prime minister, and he is trying to replicate every single error that Europe has made, but on steroids. In other words, he's trying to take every wrong decision that Europe has done. And what I mean by wrong decision, incredibly lax immigration policy, letting everybody in under multiculturalism and political correctness, that I fear that we will soon be the next Sweden. If Sweden is the sort of epitome of crazy ostrich thinking, Canada is quickly heading down that path. I guess Australia is probably not nearly as progressive as Canada. Would that be a fair statement?
Australia, we have patriots that will never allow anyone to take a chunk out of this country.
Right.
I'll put it to you this way. If there's groups that want to make pockets in this society, we are tolerant with them. And by this, we mean by election. So come election time, Australians will vote for the party that says, I will get these radicals deported.
Right.
We're not going to vote for a party that promises me electricity and better submarines. I don't want that anymore. I can live without that. I can't live with radicals in my neighborhood. So this is how we react. We react when it comes to election time. The problem is with Canada. With Canada, your politicians are too afraid to be seen like Donald Trump.
Right. Yes, you're very right in that part of the Canadian identity is to constantly position itself as different from our mean southern neighbor, right? And so you're exactly right that it's almost a Canadian reflex to say, oh no, but we're different from those bad guys, the Americans, right? We have on our backpacks, when you were speaking in English, if you've got a flag of Canada you're good. If it were the US, you're a mean guy. So I think you're right that there is this reflex of always trying to not imitate anything that is from the US. You're absolutely right. Tell me, before I let you go, Imam, are there any projects that you are currently working on that are not yet public that you'd like to maybe use this forum to promote?
Well, very soon I will make some announcements, and when I do, I'll come on. I'd love to speak to you
Oh,
about
I'd
them.
love to
And then,
anytime. Open
yeah,
invitation. Okay, so then we'll
but
hold off till then. Uh,
yeah, well, I want to make a professional video where I speak about it completely,
okay.
with all the writings and everything. And once it's done, we can speak about my objectives and my main goals. But yes, one thing, no politics. So many people think I'm heading towards a political party. No politics whatsoever. I'm
Hollywood,
more
is
of a,
Hollywood calling? Any acting in your future?
yes, there will be some acting.
All right, I
There
look
will be
forward to
some
it.
acting.
Now
But
I'm
not
real.
now I'm not really acting. now, now
I don't
now
want
I'm
to hear
very
that you're a
serious.
fake imam. Don't tell me in a couple of weeks that you were a fake imam.
I'm gonna send you a cup, by the way, the fake shake cup.
Oh, very nice. Okay, I look forward to it. Well, listen, it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad. You don't know how many people wrote to me, so excited that we would speak to each other. So thank you very much for making the
God
time. I know
bless
you're
you,
very
brother.
busy.
Thank you.
You
And
too.
I apologize if I seem to be yelling. I tried to make sure that the voice gets across. My mic seems to be a bit low today.
It
The
is,
voice
but
isn't.
but I think we've solved it. I think it worked out well. Thank you so much,
Excellent.
Imam, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Stay on the line. Thank you.
God
Cheers.
bless you.
Cheers, brother.